All right, welcome back to the Lavicast. I'm your host, Lavi Ray, and I'm here once again with IanWaffles. How you doing today, man?
Doing well. Thanks for having me again.
All right, so we decided to go ahead and start a review for issue 79 because I thought it would be better to just go ahead and just knock this one out instead of waiting for another four issues. Because I'm not gonna lie, it feels like this kind of was a turning point for a lot of the fan base, at least the ones on Twitter. And I thought it would be a good chance to go ahead and jump into it. So yeah, let's go ahead and get. So you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
All right. So this issue is meant to be the final climax with the Neo Diamond Cutters. I guess the Neo Diamond Cutters at this point.
Yes.
Fighting again, final interaction with Mimic and everything that's supposed to become, and finally building up to their final fight and what they're supposed to represent and being able to move past that. And what is everything going to entail? And after reading it, yeah, this did not need to exist at all. It's honestly kind of funny that this is a turning point because, as much as spoilers, we're going to be ripping into this issue too. It seems like a lot of fans were just really underwhelmed, to put it nicely, were underwhelmed by how awful this issue was, especially when it comes to the climax, how ultimately everything was paid off here. And while I wasn't surprised by it the slightest, but it seems like a lot of people were too. But Waffles, you were the one that was really looking forward to this. How did you feel about how they handled Mimic in particular?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, on our recent podcast we talked about, we went over a few issues and we also talked about the new annual. And in that annual, they had Gigi made a really fantastic just character biography of basically Mimic and going over his character and why he is the way he is and why he acts the way he does. And basically just giving him a lot of layers to his character that weren't there before, or at least were things that you would have to basically kind of read in yourself. Basically dealing with the idea of that he's an actor, or that he the ideas of reflections and how the mask that he wears and all the things that that represent his character through his shapeshifting powers. Whereas during the Tangle and Whisper miniseries, they more so use Mimic as an idea of a reflection of just Whisper herself, and how the idea of he is this lone wolf who ultimately is kind of trying to bring Whisper down to her level. But in the miniseries, we ended up kind of leaning into more of the idea of him questioning himself and questioning who he is and why he acts the way he is. Why is he reflecting Whisper? Why is he reflecting all these people? Why does he feel so much hatred for himself in the ways that he reflects in others? And so this idea of reflections was kind of established. And so what I really wanted, and that made me fall in love with the character. Mimic, if anyone's followed any of my podcasts with the Silver Ace or Lavi Ray, I fucking hated Mimic. He was literally, I think, my least favorite villain in the series because he's just a joke. His whole shtick is that he transforms into someone and then he only gets one chance to stab you. He can never do this. That is not viable in a children's comic. This is never going to happen. So just conceptually, he never seemed to work. He had so many stupid character things he would do. Not to go too detail into that, you can watch other podcasts for that. Specifically in Bad Guys, just the way he acts. But so with this annual, I was really looking forward to taking all these new layers to Mimic of him as a person. And now it's okay, I like Whisper as much as I think she's been dragged through the mud through the time that she's been on this in the story. Her miniseries, I did relate to her not relate to her, but I did come to care about her by the end and wanted to see her succeed and overcome her trauma and guilt, because we've been, Lord knows we've been dragging that through the mud this whole time. So finally, we're going to have Whisper overcome her trauma and overcome this person who represents all of it. But also Mimic himself has become a real character. He has real depth and real humanity to him in a twisted way. And now that can clash. Now we actually have two characters who are going to clash with each other that I'm invested to see. And, of course, Tangle's going to be here. I like Tangle. That's fine enough. And Silver's here. Okay, we'll get to that. We'll see how that goes. And ultimately, it was really bad because ultimately, to let you get back to it, Flynn did not take advantage of anything set up in Gigi's story and kind of just did the Tangle and Whisper finale. But it's been 50 issues since then. So that's kind of the starting point. So you can go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine. And if it helps for anyone else who's also upset by this, you're not alone, Waffles. Even Gigi was kind of pissed at what ended up happening. She was like, no, sorry. They were like, I can't believe I was made an accomplice to basically Mimic's death.
Yeah, and of course they're being hyperbolic and comedic, but it does go to show that they were like, what happened? I'm sure in their heads they're just they're like, what? I didn't think that was gonna happen. Oh no. But yeah, it's very, very funny that they were not informed that this was happening.
Yeah. All right. So here's the thing. This story is very lacking in terms of substance. What ultimately, just a real brief summary of everything that happens. Whisper is eating at a diner. Mimic, in the worst disguise possible, decides to come up to her as Cream. She immediately to try to get information out or whatever.
Yeah.
Whisper ends up immediately finding it out for once. Ends up immediately being able to detect that it's him for once. They end up spending 6 pages going back and forth on friends are meaningless. Friends are important. We're gonna fight. Yes, we are. Over and over again until Silver shows up, immediately lifts all of them up into their respective abilities. Mimic ends up jetting himself off with the core I forgot he even had.
Yes.
And then Mimic Whisper ends up Tangle ends up trying to track where they go or where he goes. He ends up transforming into Barry because of course we need to make another reference. Then we end up having him Then we end up following him again a little bit into the markets and setting him flying. More fight. They keep fighting a little bit more. They have Tango box with them one more time, and probably the only time she's ever been competent in a fight.
Adam Bryce Thomas does his damnedest to make it look cool.
Yes.
with what he can.
Yes, he does. Then they end up. Whisper finally ends up getting a chance to pin him. He ends up turning into a Lost World Yeti for some reason. Yes. Whisper is able to pin him down. She almost shoots him in the face, but then he ends up stabbing the core to blow themselves up. Whisper gets away, but we end up seeing at least what is assumed to be Mimic's body falling into the river below. They all celebrate. Tangle asks Whisper if she wants to go home. They do, and day is saved.
Yes.
Yeah, really fucking underwhelming. So I think for the terms of this conversation, so we can at least get some amount of content out of this, I want to go by the four main characters in the story and how this ultimately just kind of fails on every conceivable level and why this. Because I want to try making a case here that no one should have been surprised that this is how the story ended up. Mm-hmm. Like, even if you did have hopes for it, not only because of everything that they've been setting up with Mimic up to this point, but more specifically, this is Flynn's bread and butter, and he's never been capable of really being able to have emotionally satisfying endings. At least never on a consistent basis since I'll be nice and say reboot Archie. So let's start with who's probably not the weakest link here, but the one who had no reason to be in the story, if we're going to be honest. Silver. Oh, yeah. Silver. Oh, God.
So you can, do you have a main point for him? Because I do, so I can go second if
please. No, go for it.
So the main thing with Silver here is that he just kind of acts as the, I guess, the muscle of the team, or just like the overwhelming force, ideally, right? He's not used very well in that regard. But, you know, he captures Mimic, and then Mimic goes, I'm outie, and then he just flies off with his little core, because the core just overpowers Silver. Silver kind of just has the problem of, because he is supposed to be so strong, that means that other characters need to, obviously, counter him. But the counters they always come for, like the counters they always choose to give, don't make Silver look really powerful in these characters, like, even more powerful, right? No, it just makes Silver look like, oh, I guess Silver's not that strong, and also it just makes the villain look like, well, yeah, you just beat Silver, which is not how I should feel, you know. So you know, Mimic is able to basically consistently get away from Silver just by using his little Tricore thing, which makes him look pretty weak. But the biggest thing I want to bring up for Silver is, so we have 2 connection points for the story, and kind of neither of them get used very well. The one is like given lip service, which is the idea of like Silver, as we know from earlier in the story, looked up to Whisper and thought like she was this great, brave warrior of the battlefield, right? And so now he's getting to work together with her as her friend. That's kind of the thing, is while they did work together to like stop, kind of go after Mimic during the Phantom Rider or lead up saga, like the Misadventure arc, they didn't bond or connect over any of this stuff. They didn't talk about any of this stuff. He just went, hey, I saw this happen. And she goes, oh yeah, that's definitely Mimic. They worked together. And then once, you know, it was revealed that it was not Mimic as far as they could tell, they thought it was, you know, someone else or whatever. Then she was like, all right, Silver, I guess I led you astray. Goodbye. So Silver and Whisper have not become buddies or like close within the time that we've kind of introduced them together. So Silver helping Whisper doesn't feel good in any sense of like, oh man, look how far they've come. Before he was like this fanboy for Whisper, and she didn't really want anything to do with him, you know, for poor or better or whatever. She just wasn't interested. But now they're buddies and they're working together. That feels nice. You don't even get that because they don't have a connection. We didn't build up anything in between. So that's kind of wasted. The only thing they give lip service to is him being like, oh man, what does the angel of the battlefield do when there's no battle? Which is just a callback to what he heard people kind of call her and stuff. But then the second thing is this is Silver, who in his debut game, the kind of idea they wanted to go for was, you know, was it okay to kill someone who hadn't really done anything yet, you know, to save the world, right? If Sonic is definitely the ablest trigger, is it right to just like murder him outright, even if he hasn't really committed any crime? And what if he hasn't committed the crime? We don't know, right? And that was kind of Silver's thing. So while that is different from this idea of like taking out someone who is unequivocally evil, as Mimic is, that isn't really touched upon. They don't use that. And obviously this isn't the same Silver from 06 because that gets retconned, but that is a thing that thematically you can pull from Silver to lean into. You could lean into the idea of what if he has maybe not concerns about this, but what if he just has a thought about it that you could tie into. It doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be a core of the story of like, what should we kill Mimic? Obviously we should defeat Mimic or whatever. But if there's anything you could pull from, you could pull from that for Silver's character. So ultimately, Silver just feels like a body who is just in the story, even though he actually had two really strong things they could have pulled from, and they pull from neither. So that's kind of my thing with Silver.
No, that's 100% fair. I honestly would just honestly, that's kind of just it. He's really just wasted in this story overall because like they were trying to establish that he was supposed to something resembling a relationship with Whisper ever since her introductory issue back in like 8, but they've had like maybe 2 conversations since then because this comic is trying to do way too many things and does none of them well. And when it comes to this situation, yeah, they had their little apology session in 76, but there's never really anything that really establishes like, yes, Silver has some type of emotional connection or some type of reason about what he wants to do a run back with Duo or with Mimic in the story to begin with. He's just kind of here. So
or with Whisper and vice versa. Like they don't have a connection of like, you know what, they're friends now. That's really cool. Look how far they've come. You know? Yeah. So.
Yeah. So
dang, next person, I guess.
I mean, I want to like before we go into that, I want to talk about something else here, and this is an issue I think a lot of Sonic fans have. Some Sonic fans have, but especially when it comes to this comic, y'all need to understand what power scaling is. Like really, really fucking badly. Like I know it can get really stupid in certain groups. I'm a One Piece fan. I know how fucking obnoxious it can be. I've seen people try to power scale off of sweat drops. It is stupid.
Yes, I have too.
Yeah. But that does not mean that it's not necessary. If you're going to establish that this character does have psychic abilities, but there is a way to break out of it, you need to be able to establish like what those rules are. So I actually have something. I have an idea of like, oh, this character is really that fucking strong that they can break out of Silver's abilities. Because otherwise, when Silver showed up and immediately lifted Mimic in the air, there is no reason that the story should continue from there. Like, but he pressed the core. He's using his psychic abilities to literally control his body and lift him in the air. Why would he be able to move his arms at that point? He shouldn't be able to move his arm. He shouldn't be able to move his arms at that point, other than we need to keep the story going. So this is also the other problem I have with not just with power scaling, but when it comes to the villains overall. I don't know if Sega has a rule that they can't introduce any god tier villains. I don't know if that's the case.
I mean, I would say probably, given how they like to put those in the games, right? But yeah.
Right. But if they can't introduce anyone that's like super strong, that's like overly stronger than Eggman, fine. You need to introduce characters that are actually like something in that ballpark, because you're kind of hitting on it before. The only thing Mimic has to his name is a knife. And even ignoring the fact that this is a kid's comic and he's never going to use it. Literally half of the cast are fucking superpowered freaks. Why would this even be a threat for them in most cases? In most cases, it really shouldn't be. So we need to stop trying to have this. Should not even be one of the top tier villains. Shouldn't even be this should be one of the fodder villains at best, and he's completely carried by fodder villains at best. And we need to start trying to introduce actual villains that are power, that at least have something resembling powers or influences that actually serve as good contrasts or challenges for a pro tag. Now, Silver is a lot trickier, which is why I'm like, a part of me wants to say that it's like some like second demand or whatever, but I could also just easily see is like, oh yeah, this comic is written by a bunch of fans, so they're also going like, oh, we need to also put something in here because we want our fandom satisfied too, and we want Silver here. But it's like, yeah, but Silver breaks his powers break the fucking story. Unless you're going to actually introduce something resembling limits, he's always going to be this weird limbo of either being too broken or too useless. And it's like he's not.
Yeah, well, that's why I would say it's probably like there's probably the good intention of like, oh well, we'll figure it out, right? Like when I do write it, like, or not when I do write it, but like, but I am gonna figure out a way to make Silver work because people want to see Silver. Of course I do, right? It's not his fault that unfortunately he's just so broken. So it's like, oh, maybe we'll figure out a way to do it. And then I just feel like every time no one does, So it's like, yeah, I understand. Like if I were writing the comic and I had the chance to use Silver, fuck yeah, I'm going to try to use Silver. Why not? But the ways, the solutions they've come up with have been not good. So yeah, I think that's the best way. But,
no, and at this point, it's like you guys need to start introducing villains who can either serve as a good counterbalance. You either need to give Silver rules, or I'm going to be the bad guy. You got to write him out. It's got to be one of the three because otherwise, I feel like I'm always the bad guy when I say this kind of stuff, especially with that last conversation when I was basically going, yeah, Surge and Kit need to get there. They don't need some soft ooh baby moment where they realize, oh, maybe being ace is actually good. No, they want to act like useless D mid and constantly go around trying to start shit, and then just for the sake of their own ego, they need to get their asses beat. I feel like I'm a bad guy for saying that, but sometimes you do need to just go ahead and make the tough calls. And one of the tough calls here would be write him out of the story. You guys clearly don't have any ideas for him. You guys, like, whatever plot that you guys put him into, he immediately undercuts it because there's no reason most conflict should be happening with him when he can easily when his powers are this fucking broken. No, and you can't keep making him so stupid. That he's useless. So either you got to introduce some better villains that can serve as good contrast for him, or write him out. One of the two.
Well, so I guess to your point of view, you're kind of like one of those. So in writing, they have a saying called, it's a dark saying, but they call it "kill your babies." And it basically just means like, even if there's like an idea in your story that you just love, if you can see that it is going to undercut or hurt the story by having it, and there's no workaround, then you just got to cut it. Yes. Even if it's like even if it's why you made the story, or even if it's your most favorite thing. And this comic is, I guess you could say, very indulgent. It very much does want to have all of it, because again, why wouldn't you? If you're a Sonic fan writing this, why wouldn't you want to use every character? But I think the thing you're always championing, and we're always championing, is kind of the idea of like the comic needs to find some sort of narrative hook or direction, and a lot of the reasons it's not able to do that is because it is just trying to sort of be slice of life esque with some character stuff, but not for the main characters. Like, it's weird, right? It's in this weird space, and that's to do with Sega, that's to do with the writers, that has to do with fandom expectations, all these things. But what we're always trying to push for is like, well, no, if the audience is kind of what I think is dictating a lot of this, because I do think the reason you put Silver in stories like this is because people like Silver. The reason they focus on a lot of these side characters is because people like them. So if that's the case, we kind of want to champion the idea of like, actually use them less, or like focus on a core cast of characters, and that will ultimately be even better, because then that means when you do use Silver, it'll feel special. Otherwise, the characters are all just kind of around, and we're not really doing anything. So I don't know.
Right, no, yeah. Because the story is so fucking aimless otherwise. Like, right now, I am watching Sonic Underground with Dirk, and save for the first 3 episodes, it's actually, honestly, surprisingly like on the good side of mid. Like, I wouldn't recommend anyone to like sit down and go like, no, this is a hidden gem or whatever. No, it's perfectly fine for like a late 90s cartoon series. But the reason I bring it up is, on one hand, it's a lot tighter when it comes to what a story is trying to be about. It's always trying to explore what it means to like live in this totalitarian society, and people are always trying to like, maybe I can try working with Eggman. Oh wait, working with the totalitarian asshole who wants to turn everyone to robots is going to get me killed too. Who could have thought? And the whole point is about them pushing forward, like, no, always fight for freedom, always fight for people trying to make the world a better place. Fuck this asshole and undercut him every way, shape, and form. But there's also a downside where we're like in the episode 30 at this point, and there's been no it's very episodic, and you can really feel it because like we keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's like, okay, it's time to start changing things. And I'm feeling like that 2000 that 2010s 2020s, it's time to progress kind of energy. And I bring that up because this is worse than that. This is honestly worse than that, because while Underground has more of a through line where it easily could have a story, IDW has the same problem of just being being kind of aimless and not having anything to really say. But unlike Underground, it doesn't have an excuse. It doesn't have an excuse to do that other than just, we're looking to be the fan service comic. And if it wants to be the fan service comic, fine. But don't pretend like you have a plot. Don't pretend like you have stakes. Don't pretend like you have anything dramatic or core to say. Just admit the fact that you are just here to be a fandom slop and nothing else. So,
right, and we'll also, we've kind of talked about this of like, if it wants to be fan service, it's just not very good at it, because we have like the annuals and we have a lot of the specials, like the holiday specials, and those are just really boring. So like, and I think where the comic is just fun and it's just like, oh, we're just having fun, is usually with the classic stories. I didn't like the Knuckles one at all, but the other ones, like even the Fang one, which now that we're out of the of it being the only comic that you have to read for 4 months, which was ridiculous. Now that it's just its own thing, it's cute. It's a cute little fun time. It makes Snack look pretty fun. And it's got some pretty good art. I really like the expressiveness of it, and it's got some cute ideas. It's just a cute, fun time. But I feel like IDW never actually hits even that. It's just like, yeah, no, we sure are existing, because it just feels so tepid when it does a lot of that stuff. So sorry, not to get too off topic of the.
Oh no. That, honestly, that's not off topic. That is the topic, because that's kind of the whole point. Like, we can, we'll swing back around in a minute. We'll swing back around a minute. Let's talk about Whisper, because tepid is a really good example. Because like, you're not the only one who's feeling that situation right now. That's pretty much what most people I was seeing on Twitter were talking about. Where it's just like, I remember seeing, like, just not a couple of months ago, everyone was talking about like, oh, Tangle and Whisper, they're my favorite characters. They're so great. They're so wholesome. And now I'm seeing posts going like, these bitches are fucking useless. They have nothing to add.
Oh no.
And I'm like, I'm glad you caught up with me. Thank you for catching up with me. But it should not have taken this long. Because and the whole reason they felt that way is because this was such a part of a conclusion for the arc. We were spending all this time building up to like Whisper's fight with Mimic, and it's like, oh, how are they going to fight again? What's going to happen? What's going to go? And it's just the most by the numbers. What could have happened? They end up meeting. There's a little bit of exchange there's a little bit of action exchange back and forth. They beat him up. She doesn't even get to kill him. He kills himself because, of course, according to Flynn, revenge killing is wrong.
Yeah,
I'll get to that later. But the problem is when we get to when we get to the end of this story for Whisper, she's kind of done. Like, she now has we got a moment of her being able to speak without having to have her whisper everything. Like, she's actually like using full complete speech bubbles. It's like, okay, that's nice and all, but it's like, okay. And now she's like with her girlfriend, and now they're going off into the sunset or whatever. It's like, okay, why do you need to be here now? Like, what are we ultimately left with this girl? What does she add or bring to? What would she bring or add by being in the main cast? Or showing up in games from now on? And the short answer is nothing. And this isn't new. Not only because like this is pretty much like both Flynn and Stanley have not been doing anything to add to her roster, to add to her personality or her worldview. All her story has been up to this point is just going, well, is her just constantly being a bit soft spoken, can be a little stern and serious, and wants to try to find Mimic, but then will reel back and join back the group again because plot, and not do anything and not have anything else to offer. So it's like, what can we do if we're going to bring her back into the story? And this isn't, and when I say this isn't new, it's not just because like her personality hasn't gotten this. All of the characters in not only do all the characters in IDW have this problem, this even goes back into Reboot. Like in when Archie ended up having to have his whole reboot situation because all the stuff that was happening with them at the time, Flynn took that as an opportunity to go, all right, I want to reboot the Freedom Fighters. I want to be able to update them into the modern setting and all this kind of stuff. He even got them relatively okay redesigns. I was like, okay, sure, we're gonna go with this. But when you honestly look at their characters and really think about who they were beforehand and what they have now, you kind of realize Flynn wrote them into a corner with nothing to do because he gave them because he reintroduced them, but all of them had their main character arcs either mostly resolved or completely resolved, and they had nothing really to offer in terms of personality or their worldview or anything when it comes to general interactions. Bunny is a good example. Her whole thing was that she had her limbs turned into robots, robotic limbs, and she had a whole complex about that. We even get that backstory again in the comics. But then when we end up moving forward with the story, we end up finding out that all the freedom fighters in the past story, especially Tails, ended up reassuring her and making her feel warm and welcome. And now we cut to present day, and she's fine. She's completely, mostly, if not completely, over all of her issues with robotic limbs. She's up for helping. No need to like try to backstab or anything like that. She's just completely okay. So it's like, all right, why do you need to be a main character at this point? Like, you have a premise, kind of, a premise that was mostly resolved. Why do you need to be here? What motivation do you have? What perspective can you add to the group dynamic that isn't already available? And they didn't really have one for Bunny. And Sally, Nicole, Rotor, especially Rotor, and Antoine all had those problems to some degree. Even Antoine, who's probably arguably one of the better ones, who, while a coward, is at least something. They basically also resolved that we're going to end that in the very next issue. The very next issue that was going to be released when Sonic and him go on an adventure to try to find the random dude. He gets his sword from his family, and now he's like, I am a brave warrior now, and I'm just here to beat bad guys. It's like, okay, now what? Like, what? Like, congratulations, you are now fighter number 624. What do you like? Why do we need you here for this? And it's the same. And to bring it back here, it's again the same problem. We introduce a character, but they have nothing to add, nothing to bring to the story, nothing to going on here because Flynn never thinks that shit through. And that's always been the consistent problem with everything we talk about with this. Like, you can't plan everything to the detail when you're writing a script. That's when you're writing a story. That's obviously true. But you gotta plan something. If you're going to go ahead and dedicate so much time for a character that you're expecting, that you want to be a main character, they need to have something more going for them than just their baggage and their backstory. They gotta have something that they're looking to contribute, or some type of archetype or role that they're looking to bring to the story. Being another fighter isn't enough in this cast. You know?
Right. Yeah, no, I get everything you said. Yeah, well, and we've talked about that also just in other podcasts about just the roles the characters fill, because sure, it's fun to have them there because we care about them from ideally the games. If you care about Silver, you care about any of these characters, you're not getting anything out of them being here. You know, like you're getting the bare minimum, which is that they're just here. And oftentimes you're actually getting less because usually they're probably not getting treated the way you probably want them, which is like people want to see Silver be a badass, or they want to see Silver have like character stuff going on, and you're just not going to get that. So yeah, for a variety of reasons, but yeah, so that's it for Silver as far as I can tell.
Oh yeah, no, no. We wrapped up Silver. I was on Whisper, but the whole point is, yeah. But honestly, I think that also applies to her. Like, and it's really just kind of sad. Like, you think like this was supposed to be the moment where we finally get like some type of climax for her actually be able to face and beat up the person that basically helped to get her entire group killed, and it doesn't mean anything. And that's because Flynn didn't have an idea about what he wanted to do with this. Like, back in 2023, he ended up doing a podcast where he was being asked, like, okay, what do you have in store in mind for Whisper? And he basically just admitted he had no idea what he was going for with that. I'll post the link.
Which is very weird considering in pre-boot Archie and also reboot, he really planned everything out. And I know I think I asked him this once. I said, like, when you're working on IDW, how do you kind of go about it that's different? And he's like, well, with IDW, I just kind of play it by ear, which is a type of storytelling that people do, where they just kind of go with, they just kind of make it up as they go, especially if he's not going to be the head writer most of the time. Maybe he believes that, maybe, like he says in the little podcast thing, he says, like, oh, maybe Daniel Barnes has like an idea, or maybe like Stanley has an idea. And he's like, maybe one day I'll come up with an idea. And then obviously he was the one to write it. So he decided to come up with whatever his idea was. But ultimately what that ended up being is it seems like he just kind of went back to the miniseries because he hadn't planned anything through since then. And by doing so, it's what everyone has kind of felt with this, where it's like, oh, it's just kind of Tangle and Whisper again, but a little more. And not even like more character, but just like more characters in the scene. Silver's here now. Now we've spent more time with these characters, so ideally you like them more. Ideally it feels more impactful that she wins with the power of friendship or whatever, but she already won with the power of friendship last time, only this time he dies. So it doesn't really add much, at all. So yeah, it's just and I guess maybe what I actually, because we hadn't talked about this, maybe it ties into the idea of like before she wanted to kill Mimic, and then Tangle stopped her, and this time she is going to go to kill Mimic, and then he kills himself. So I guess that's sort of not growth, but it's cool, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying.
I know. I don't blame you for trying. It's just there's nothing here worth putting that. There's nothing here worth putting that kind of effort to defend with this shit. To be honest, and honestly, everything I will say about Whisper, I'm gonna be honest, kind of really applies to Tangle too, except even worse. Like Whisper, at the very least, had a very even though it was a fart of an ending, it was at least an ending to her story. We have now spent about 74 issues with Tangle in the story. Not kind of like actually no, it would be 79 because she showed up issue 4, but also got a miniseries. So yeah, she's been in the story for a significant amount of time. Why is she here? Like, she was originally introduced to be a female protagonist for Sonic to go on adventures with, because apparently Amy's too busy, Cream is too young, and Rouge has odd sex appeal for a bad. I don't think I've ever said that on here, but I want this on record. Him saying that alone should have been disqualified for him to be a writer for this franchise. Not just because Rouge is queen or whatever. No, it's for the simple fact of if the first thing that you look at when you're a fantasy writer, because the whole point of being a fantasy writer is that you are looking to be creative. You are looking to try to subvert, play around with different tropes, play around with different environments, settings, political environments, trying to find different ways to show off information to your audience. The whole point is that you were just looking to try to be as creative as possible. If your first reaction in looking at Rouge is, oh, that's odd sex appeal, I can't make her a main character, you don't need to be here, because that just tells me that you are too much of a coward to ever be able to look at something beyond your initial expectations, or be able to get out of your head, be able to get out of your initial headspace. That is not someone who needs to be a head writer or a creative lead for a fantasy project.
Like, if it's the idea of like you're not even going to try to use the character, you're just going to toss them aside and make someone new, is kind of the idea you're saying.
And it really shows when you. I want to get back to Tangle. I just want to drop on this real quick. Rouge, I actually kind of noticed this. Flynn had literally throughout all of IDW, I think Flynn has given the main character status to almost every character at some point except Rouge. I actually think he tries to avoid writing Rouge as much as possible. Now, when you really think about it, she barely is a factor in the Mel virus arc. She doesn't really do anything. And honestly, before and after that, she barely does anything. So I'm like, what? In comparison to even literally almost any other character, I actually think you could probably say more about what Silver has done in this story than you can say about Rouge.
Yeah, cool, because at least he has he does have a story with Blaze, even if it's very weak, which is they built the garden together, they went on vacation together, they've grown closer, there have been moments where they've commented on each other's kind of growth or whatever. Rouge just kind of has to babysit Shadow and doesn't really even get to do that because Shadow is, he has to do whatever he wants. So
yes. but I digress. Back to Tangle. So the whole idea is that she was supposed to be the main female lead for this franchise to have adventures with Sonic, and I don't think she's ever been. I think she's only been around Sonic like twice for a story long term.
Right, so she hasn't even really got to fulfill that.
Yeah, no, because she got placed into being Whisper's emotional support animal, basically, because like almost all of her, especially after the miniseries, every story that she's had at this point is just about is about her going, Whisper, are you okay? Are you having any problems? You can talk to me. I'm your best friend. And I don't blame people for trying to think like, oh, these two are such a couple. But it's like, it feels very codependent and toxic rather than like, not toxic. It feels really codependent and kind of eerily one-sided. It really feels like a...
I guess maybe a better way to frame it would be like, for example, I always say like with IDW, it really sucks because it feels like the comic's just kind of giving you scraps for everything. And so if you really do like the idea of like Tangle and Whisper as a relationship, obviously, I would say it's pretty clear Sega is probably vetoing any obvious depictions that they're a couple, even if all the writers in their heads, that's kind of how they're writing them. But even then, you're not really getting anything out of that for them being a couple. You're not there like in this case, you get that one panel of them kind of like holding hands and being like, yeah, let's go. And that is actually a really sweet looking panel. I actually quite like that. It's like, man, I wish we got more of that. And that's kind of where Tangle and Whisper kind of like fall for me, where it's like most of the time, the thing that we always kept joking about with Whisper is that she is perpetually being tortured because it's just like she gets her storyline with Mimic and how she's going to not run away from people, and then Evan writes it to where it's like actually off screen she left because she wanted to go find Mimic, and then she comes back and she's like actually now I'm fighting with Whisper, or I'm mad at Whisper or Tangle. I'm mad at Tangle because she wanted to use the name of our dead team, and then now they're friends again, and now they're coming back here again. So it's like they're either constantly separate, or like when they are together, they're not really doing that much cute stuff together. So I think that's why this kind of feels really bad for a lot of people, because they did have more in the Tangle and Whisper miniseries. It was about their relationship, and that's why people care about it, because that miniseries actually was genuinely about that. And so when you get to this climax, there really isn't anything of value that you get out of that other than it's cool that Tangle gets to beat the shit out of Mimic. That looks pretty badass. Adam Bryce Thomas did the best he could with the paneling or whatever, and also just like the impact he does, and like the colorist where they make it like kind of like white and red, which I think is really cool kind of way to use like the impact smears and stuff. I like that a lot. So, and it is genuinely cathartic to see like Whisper just punch someone, or sorry, Mimic, Tangle just punch Mimic in the face like over and over. That is pretty cathartic. I like that. And it is a good callback that she finally uses the Wispon, and she's like, see, I didn't break it. So that is a genuine like full circle moment. That's cute of her carrying Whisper. But I think people wanted more because it's like that's kind of the stuff you expect to be getting in between all this, right? That's the kind of stuff you consistently want to see from these characters. Now we kind of get in this big climax. It kind of feels really underwhelming because of the villain and because of Whisper, and then also, it's kind of not too much for Tangle, and this feels really underwhelming, So that's kind of why I feel like this is the culmination for a lot of people, because they kind of felt like, oh, the reason we're not getting that stuff is because it's going to be here, and it really wasn't. So.
And that's kind of what I want to try to say here. Like, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer in a sense. I just kind of want to just be like, let's just be direct and be honest. This is how, like, for every place people are thinking, oh, no, this will end up being built too later. This will get too later. No, this is what Flynn does not think any of this shit through. Flynn does not have some overarching plan. He does not try to think his themes through. So whatever you think that he's going to be setting up for later, he's not. It's just going to end up ending like this, where it's just going to be the most basic, let's just get this out of the way possible. Because I feel like a lot of people latch onto him because he is a fan. He's a fan who ended up making it into a creative lead spot, and he knows how to make references. So it feels like, yes, no. He knows what he's talking about. We're not dealing with Pontaf, who's just like here for contracting stuff, and they just like throwing in random jokes that don't make any sense. I'm like, fair, but now we're left with a guy who likes doing dramatic stories, but has nothing thematic or coherent to say. And whenever people do defend him, do try to defend the few times he does try to get deep, they're basically going, yeah, Sonic is always an asshole. And it does make sense to defend the genocidal tyrant from getting killed. We should allow genocidal tyrants to get second chances because maybe they will get better once they get another concussion. Like, that's the kind of stuff you have to defend when Flynn is writing stuff, when Flynn is trying to get deep, which if you have to, that's not deep. That's really fucking stupid. So,
well, and it's like, I'm someone who I've read what I would consider like just the best the best like Sonic writing for me, which is a lot of his preboot stuff, and not even just like because it represents Sonic well. It doesn't, because it's Archie, so Archie was never going to represent Sonic well. But in terms of the writing that is there, it's really well done, and there's genuine like layers to what he's doing. Like, I was thinking of when I was reading this, I was like, man, Flynn, he wrote the scene with Hope in the Shadow Saga, which literally uses like visual storytelling of like the mist, and like the mist turning into different characters and representing that, and then like the mist like subsides at the end of the scene. And Flynn had to direct that because they talk about the things in the scene. They mention the steam, they mention or the smoke clouds and stuff. They mention that stuff. Hope is an obvious parallel to Maria because that was what she was invented to be. Her name is fucking Hope, and the scene is about Hope and about how and moving on from these things. So he knows how to write things with like layers, with depth, and like giving all these, like, he thought preboot through all the way to issue 300, and it only got to issue 247. So he is someone who loves to plan things and loves coming up with these ideas. But he's just not doing that really anymore. And I think that's because he's putting most of his most of that effort into the games, where it seems like, one, they'll probably allow him to do a lot of more creative stuff because he's working with them directly, so he can pitch more ideas. But two, it just really does seem like he is just kind of just doing IDW kind of on autopilot, or just kind of being like, well, what are the fans? I mean, he said this. He wants to give the fans what they want, which sounds nice, and it is a nice sentiment. But I feel like that is ultimately why this comic has felt so aimless and stagnant, because what he wants to give fans is like, well, the fans want the references, so I'll give them the references. Or they want Silver in the story, so I'll put Silver in the story. Why not? But he's not doing anything with that, for whatever reason that might be, you know?
Well, no, I can explain that, because you can't make a coherent story like that when you're based. The whole reason why writing something by committee is never a good idea is because when you end up doing that, it always leads to things being incoherent or not having a creative focus for what you're going for. And when you're basically going, well, I'm just going to be putting stuff in because the fans want it, then all you're doing is work on a weird feedback loop where you're just doing whatever the story is supposed to be going for just because of what fans are going for. But fans, that's just a giant hodgepodge of a bunch of different people who will randomly pick up who randomly talk about what they like and what they don't. You can't use that as a barometer for how you control a story. A story needs to have something resembling a clear point of logic, a clear storyline. Like, really, if you are a hardcore defender of IDW, really think about this. Think about any other franchise that you like, any other story that you like. Do you think it would have been served better if the main where the story kept going, well, I'm just going to put something in here. I'm just going to keep writing whatever story that the fans constantly keep asking me to do, and I'll just keep doing that. Do you think it's going to come out coherent? I would put money on no. You?
Right. Unless you're someone who can balance, like what Flynn used to do is he would balance those expectations of like, he'd get fan feedback and then he would implement that into the stories. And so like, yeah, I mean, we've gone over it a million times. And again, it's not like he's the head writer anymore, so it's not even like a big deal in the sense of like he's steering the ship. Evan Stanley apparently is, like, I think she said she's definitely the head writer now. It says on like her little Twitter bio, which is crazy. Great for her. Good for her. But it's just one of those things where it's like when he does come back, like that's why I was worried for this story, because I was like, oh man, but Flynn's writing it, and I feel like he's just gonna do Tangle and Whisper again, and that is legitimately what he did. Like even people I talked to who liked the story, not even like they loved it, but they were just like, yeah, no, it was good enough. It was fine. But they were disappointed. They were like, I feel like he really could have done a lot more. And the thing we both agreed on was we said, yeah, this just reminds me of the Tangle and Whisper story. He just did the Tangle and Whisper story, but again, you know, but now you care about the characters more, ideally, right? Because it's been, 50 issues or whatever. And it's like, that's just the bare minimum. And he didn't do it well. So yeah. But let's see, what character are we on? I mean, did we have anything else for Tangler, or should we probably climax with Mimic? That sounded terrible.
Let's wrap up with Mimic, shall we?
Yeah. All right. Should I go or you?
Mimic's your boy. You go ahead for it.
Man, I mean, I already talked about it. They just did him dirty. So I told Lav to pull up this image because I feel like this is the image that is trying to dive into that emotion that is at the core of the annual, which is that this isn't just like a face of like, fuck, I'm gonna lose, not if I take myself with. That's what the bottom right one is. That one looks like, fuck you, kill myself. But like the one on the left, there is genuinely like he's like pulling his head back, like the way he like squints his eye, the way he looks at her, the way like the teeth are, and like they even put like little extra like wrinkles on him. It looks like he really is like beaten and like upset, and also like he feels like almost like betrayed, or he feels like there's a lot of emotions you can pull out of it that I think were intentional, because it's a whole shot that is kind of just around this like grimace that he gives, and it's the only time in the whole story that he really like breaks character, because during the scene where he's talking to his cream or whatever, he's just in like monologuing villain mode of like, yes, we're both evil, or deep down or whatever, we both believe in working alone. And throughout the story, what I wanted a moment like this where you actually see that depth that Gigi had given him of like, it really like gets to him maybe whenever she says, mentions like, oh, like you weren't there for our friends or whatever. But no, he's just kind of in evil mode. And so the thing that really stands out is like, this is the moment that, again, when I was talking to one of my friends, they were like, this is the moment that I wish the comic had leaned in more on, because this does feel like it is actually trying to lean into that, to like invite you, the audience, because Mimic is like has more depth, to be like, look at that face, look how much pain he's in, look how like, what does that mean? But there's a difference between like a story having subtlety and like, because you don't want someone to spell it out for you. What do you want? Or some people might say, what do you want him to say in his brain, like what he's thinking? One, I'm cool with that. I like shonen stories. They do that all the time. But let's say you don't want that. Let's say you don't want that, right? And sometimes it is very cool if you can do it only through like the expressions and stuff. That's really cool. So what they could have done is, the whole idea with Mimic's character is the idea of reflections, or these were the ideas that Gigi had introduced to his character, the idea of reflections and using water and like imagery of mirrors and stuff. So one, why does this fight with Mimic of all characters, take place just in the Rainbow Grand Canyon? Why does it take place there? That has nothing to do with his character. Why wouldn't you take it, like, he could even be here, but what if it's like in like, because I don't know, maybe it's like a museum that talks about like where this canyon came from, or why there's a tourist trap here. And what if there's like a little theater room and this takes place in a theater? If it's in a theater, that is intentional. That feels like the audience, you can then piece together the ideas of like, oh man, Mimic's whole thing is like being an actor, being on a stage. So if he's having this conversation with, you don't even have to change any of the dialogue. He can have the exact same conversation he had with Whisper. And it all means it would have weight and meaning to it, because it's on a stage. The idea is that this is the role he's playing. This is the idea he's playing. And he believes that Whisper is also playing a role. They're literally on a stage. You could use the spotlights as like things to like pan out the scene. They don't have to be diegetic. It doesn't have to be like literal spotlights. But you can use that in the paneling and stuff. And the idea of them being on a stage, you change nothing about the dialogue. And that adds so much to the character. And then you come to this point. When Whisper looks up at Whisper, have it be that you see her reflection in his eye. She takes off the mask. So the mask represents like she's taking off the mask. I'm just going to look at you. I'm going to take you down. And then in his reflection, in his eye, he sees Whisper. There's so much you can draw from that. You could draw the idea of like, he hates the way he looks at her. He hates what she represents, or like the fact that, he's reminded of them. She took off the mask, right? The idea is that he wanted to use the mask to like not have to think about them. It felt like a mask that he was putting on to not have feelings or whatever. So just by her taking off the mask, and you see in his eye, his reflection of her, and then he kills himself. There's so much you can draw from that, and that is intentional. That is like that is the subtext being used in the imagery in the story. But all we get is just him looking really upset, and you can kind of piece together that maybe he might be pulling from some feelings from the annual, but there's nothing in the story that I can draw from. I just go, well, he could be thinking anything about from the annual, and then you just kind of put that in your brain. But that there's nothing to engage with. I have to make the story. So when I'm reading it, when I'm looking at his face, there's nothing that I'm pulling from in the moment. I'm just going, okay, there's a lot of stuff in the annual that could be in reference to. He does look pretty upset. He's probably upset about how far he's come. Maybe he's upset about his friends. Maybe he betrayed them. Like, there's nothing, right? And so therefore, it just falls really flat. And that's just that's the unfortunate thing for Mimic, is that they did not have to do a lot. Literally, just change the setting and change one shot, and it would legitimately add like 2 to 3 extra points to the story, because that means that the story it has a foundation. It has the stage to do everything it's doing, and that is the context. That is the subtext. Because at the end of the day, we're not in Mimic's head anymore. We're in Whisper's head, right? We're with our heroes. So we probably shouldn't. We probably wouldn't be in his head. We probably wouldn't know what he's thinking. But using that in the story, that is cluing you, the audience, in and giving you a framework to work with. And what this comic does is the bare minimum, which is just that he looks a little upset when he's about to die. And then he kills himself. The end. Bup. So, so that's kind of the big thing for Mimic, is why and why I think a lot of people feel really disappointed, especially why I feel really disappointed, because there was so much you could have pulled from, and we just didn't. And I think that's really unfortunate. So, especially since he's just definitely dead. So, say what you will about like a lot of stories or whatever. I do believe fully that they are fine with killing off their villains. I think they're going to stick with Starline being dead, and I think they're going to stick with this guy being dead.
Here's my thing. Oh no, I agree with you on that. My thing is, I just wish they stopped being cowards and let the heroes actually pull the bullet. Let the heroes pull the trigger instead of them constantly doing bullshit like this.
I mean, I do genuinely think that you just can't. I don't think that would be allowed at all in any world. It's possible Sega would allow that, but I mean, it's literally she's pointing a gun. If she shot him, I just don't think it'd be allowed. Maybe it would be allowed, but from everything Flynn's talked about and kind of the other writers have talked about, I just don't think they would let them do that.
If then that's the case, why the fuck do they even do this story to begin with? Why the fuck do they even do it?
Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Like everything I was saying about Mimic applies to Whisper now too. If you gave the character a fucking gun, but you can't let them use it to actually shoot anybody, why are they here?
Yes, again, it's well, I mean, it's kind of like in if you're gonna do that, then you need to give value to these items. Again, that's where the annual is so good, because the knife that Mimic has actually has value, because it's obviously it's very like obvious, the idea of like, oh, he has a knife. What does he do? He stabs people in the back, right? He stabbed his team in the back. But that knife has value in that story because the whole story is about him stabbing people in the back. We have so many scenes where he's with other people and he leaves them behind, and then ultimately what does he do? He stabs someone in the back, and then what's the climax of the scene? What is the whole point of the entire story? Is that he's going to stab Whisper in the head from behind, and he can't do it because one, he gets interrupted, and two, like he gets like caught up in his own head before even doing it, and so he wastes time, and then people show up or whatever. So, and then at the end of the you literally have the shot. At the end of the story, they have the knife, and it's aiming towards towards the side, and it is aimed towards the fire because there's a fire in the scene, and the fire is literally oozing towards the knife. So it's giving the knife like this depth of like, or this energy. I think you have the image here. It's the end of the annual where he's standing there. Yeah, literally, they framed it perfectly that the knife is surrounded by the flames. Gosh, GD's so fucking good. It's framed around the fire because that's what we're leaning towards. We're leaning towards the violence that he wants to commit, towards these people. And so we use the flames of the fire to like aura, put the aura around that. That gives the knife value, even though he can't use that knife for shit. It's a kid's comic. So like, that's the thing is like, even if you couldn't use the gun, even if you couldn't use the knife, you can use these symbols, these items in ways that do matter. And Flynn didn't do that. So,
yeah. Well, no, I'm taking that step forward. So, taking that step further, like, I am agreeing with you, like, that, yeah, you can at least use that on the symbolic level. But I'm like, this is an action comic first and foremost. Give the characters actual weapons and abilities that they can actually use. Like, I think that's way more like and you can use, and then you can touch on the symbolism to them. So if we're going to go ahead and have Whisper have a Wisp Bomb, but she can never use it to actually do damage to somebody, then that just brings up a further question of, yeah, why do we need her around? Like, I get it. A lot of people are like, no, we need more cute girls, and she's a cute girl. Let's keep her here. But it's like, she doesn't have a personality that works. She's been in this comic for over 70 issues. We have not had her establish a relationship with anyone else in the game cast other than Silver, and Silver's already tenuously connected with them in the first fucking place. She doesn't have a strong or versatile personality, so you could throw her into a bunch of different stuff, and she actually has something to say or to do about it. Her whole gimmick explicitly prevents her from being able to do that, because even though they have her starting to speak normally at the end, she starts reverting right back to whispering in the first place. So even if she does, so she's most likely still going to continue whispering. And even if they don't, what is her perspective going to be other than just the most basic, here's the thing that the most normal person would end up arguing for? Nothing. So it also doesn't help the fact that she can't fight worth a damn. Like her winning a fight with Mimic really doesn't mean anything when she constantly gets bodied by everyone else in this goddamn story. She can't fight. Her weapon she explicitly cannot use against other people. She cannot. She doesn't have a personality that actually works to bounce off of anybody else, and she doesn't have any relationships with anyone in the game cast besides Silver. Why does she need to be here?
Right. Well, and I think we talked about it. It's like now you kind of have to build a new character out of her. I feel like.
And at that point, I might as well. At that point, just make a new character. Like it's not worth keep. Like I know, like a lot of people are invested with her, but I'm like, I'm sorry, guys. If you can get invested with this, it's probably easy for you to get invested with someone else too. So it would be easier to start with a new character from the ground up who is actually designed to be a proper protagonist who can work off the eccentricities of the game cast, rather than this girl whose story is done, and actively cannot be used and actively can't be used in fights without also being strong armed like Silver. It's just like, no, just write her. No, just she got her leg back in the lamest way possible, but she got her leg back. She's done. Let's go ahead and retire her. With Tangle has had literally nothing to do, and you can't. I have literally not gotten one good counter reason for why she needs to be in the story. The best defense I've ever gotten from her was from Mayday, someone who I've debated on this channel before. His best defense for why she should be in the games in particular is that she can have a story about how she's a normie who wants to be a hero and gets caught up with all the craziness that the game cast does. And her whole story is about how she is not built for this and ends up retiring right after that.
Right. What? So which is kind of like a story that goes in a circle, basically.
Yeah. It's like half the fucking game cast hasn't had proper character focus since fucking 06. Why the fuck are we going to waste resources on developing a character who explicitly says she's not made for this?
Right. And last thing I'll say is that Mimic has his Wisp is here, which is the blue Wisp, and we don't do anything with that either. So unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of covered everything with Mimic.
Yeah, and we got a pretty good discussion out of this one. So
yeah, no, that's pretty good.
Was there anything else?
Is there anything else? Apparently, we're going to be getting a new villain in 2 issues, and I have not seen anyone get excited about that, and I am having a hard time actually giving a shit.
I do like the design, but nothing about it screams like what the threat will be. So I guess I'm interested to see, what they do with that. Because if it's just meant to be like intimidation, I'm not getting intimidating from them. But I do like the design. I do like this weird kind of gesture thing. And there's a lot of knights things they could pull from, which could be fun. As long as they do it, in a meaningful way for the story. Evan's writing this arc, right? Or at least she's kicking it off.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll see where that goes. I don't have too high of hopes. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Because I do like this, like, also, like, I think he's, like, big, right? Like, he's actually, like, a big guy, because they're, like, on top of him there, right? No, that's the Emerald.
We don't know how big or small they are. Like, one of the other images is this.
Okay, so yeah, they're probably like normal Sonic size. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do like a lot of the imagery. I like the idea of going to this carnival. I do like that Sonic and or not Sonic, Shadow and Rouge are going to be here because that's like a cool, like it's the same reason I was excited for them to be in like the Chow Races story, because that's like an environment you wouldn't necessarily expect them to be. So if we can write Shadow good, guys, this could be cool, but we'll see what happens. I do like this cover a lot. Who did this one? Is this Natalie Fordrain?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like their style. I love Tails' face there. So, very, very good. But yeah, so I guess we'll go into that. Well, okay, so next week, or next issue is not this, though, right? Because this was 79. 80, we're wrapping up the Clutch storyline, question mark. Of, like, him sending them to this egg base.
Yeah.
Where we're going to fight a robot. Let's go. Oh, boy. Who's writing this one?
Oh, it's our friend, Flynn.
Well, there we go. So it's going to be a big action issue, I would guess.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so did you have anything else for this issue, or are we good?
No, I think we're good. All right. Thank you very much for coming by to help discuss this issue. Can you tell everybody where they can find you, Waffles?
Yeah, I mean, Waffles, you can find me on Twitter. I'm still helping Low Art with the Archie Sonic retrospective. We're still going through the Flynn era, so we're talking about Next, we're going to be talking about the Chaotix and why the Archie Chaotix are so entertaining. And the Archie Chaotix are actually a fun example where I think every writer handles them very well in a pre-boot, even Penders, for as weird as they are weird in a very funny ways. So it'll be fun to just kind of talk about them in general, because they're one of the few characters who are just kind of always enjoyable no matter who is writing them. But especially when we get to the Flynn era, and he does a lot of stuff with especially Mighty and Ray. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we're going to talk about there. So, but thanks for having me as usual, Lav.
All right, thank you for being here, man. So I will see you guys all next time. Peace.